Hello, good afternoon. Happy May. It's good to see some familiar names and faces. Welcome, welcome. If you want to find the chat, as usual, we'd love to have you chime in the chat. Tell us what you do that's related to working with people with dyslexia or kids with dyslexia. And then if you want to tell us anything else, that would be great, like what you teach, if you're a teacher, that would be awesome. All right, thanks Sarah for finding the chat and getting your information in there. Awesome, awesome, welcome. I hope that some of you had some nice weather time yesterday if you were in the Eugene area. All right, if you haven't done that yet, find the chat. Would love for you to say what you do as far as like working with kids or tutoring, what you teach if you're a teacher, and where you teach. Great, thank you, Lynn and Victoria. Okay, Kalia, not sure how to say your name. I'm a little dyslexic though, so if you didn't know that, that's part of the problem. Good to see some familiar faces. Welcome back to our final presentation of the school year. Awesome, thanks Debbie. We do, over the last couple of sessions, have really enjoyed people chiming in the chat with questions as we're presenting. So get your brains thinking about comprehension, because we're hoping that we can give you some ideas to help you in the classroom. Welcome, welcome. All right, we're probably gonna get started here. Yeah, why don't we go ahead and get started, Angie?
Okay, welcome you guys. Tonight is our final presentation out of a whole year of them. So we're really excited to have you guys here. We're excited for tonight. Tonight we're talking about comprehension. This is kind of the final, go ahead Becca if you want to switch it to the next one. We are kind of bringing all of the reading together. So comprehension is really our big goal as readers. Everything leads up to this. We talk about this is the ultimate goal of reading. So we're taking all of these strands. We've talked about a lot of them in parts, and we're bringing it all together and talking about comprehension tonight. So comprehension is talked about as the product and the goal of reading, but it's also definitely has its own quirks of how to teach it also. You know what I forgot to do, Becca, was more of an intro of like kind of so let me back up just a second. A little off my game tonight because I'm at my house instead of my classroom. So let me first back up really fast and just say we're part of Decoding Dyslexia. This is the final of a series of products. Will you type in the chat a yes or no if you've seen us before? Hopefully you have, since I'm starting off a little fumbled and that wasn't your first impression. We are recording tonight. You will get a copy of the recording. You'll get a copy of the slideshow. And so the copy of the slideshow and the copy of the recording has some of our previous presentations, the slideshows and the recordings. We didn't record the first few, but most of them you'll get a copy of that also. So we'll refer to some of the things that we've talked about before. And I do see that we have some people that's the first time that you've seen us and some repeats. So that's exciting. Just to state up front too, that we don't want this recording shared just publicly or all with your staff, but it's really designed for the people that have registered for this or are here tonight or have registered to watch this and didn't make it tonight. So, but there are better experts out there if you're interested in learning more or sharing this with staff. There's better and more just people that know a lot more about what they're talking about and are not just on a journey of learning like we are. So I am Angie Pebworth. I'm a first grade teacher, and I have a son who is 13 who has dyslexia. And as he was struggling to learn how to read, it kind of led me down this path of wanting to know more about how kids learn how to read. And that just got me on this journey of like realizing how much I didn't know about how kids learn how to read. And so I just started this journey of learning more and more. And Beck and I love to kind of nerd out and talk about this. And we're excited to have you join our journey of learning tonight and really this year. Becca, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll keep going with comprehension?
Sure. Hi, I'm Becca Hauge. I'm a special education teacher at Veneta Elementary. I work with Angie and with Deanna, who's here. And I got to go to a training on dyslexia several years ago. So I've been interested in it for a while. If you're here right at the beginning when we signed in, I did disclose that I am dyslexic. So I've been learning so much about myself and about my students in this process. And it's been really fun to try and implement new strategies to support students in my classroom or in other people's classrooms as well. So I'm really excited to be here with you all and that you guys are joining us on this journey.
Okay, now we'll get started. We're talking about comprehension tonight, and it is really exciting because it's the purpose of all of our reading instruction that we do is to be able to have kids read something and know what it's saying. We are also talking about a lot of the strategies specific to comprehension, but a lot of those tie into all these different parts of this reading rope together into kind of learning how, or kids being able to be successful, skilled readers and understand what they're reading. Go ahead. This slide is just kind of reiterating the importance of comprehension and how it is the final goal of reading. However, it's very complicated, and it includes kind of all these different parts of teaching reading that lead up to it and are tangled into it. And in order for kids to really be strong, to be strong in reading comprehension, they must also be strong in decoding and language comprehension. So if one of those is weak, then their reading comprehension is not as strong. So they need to really have kind of the strength of all the other skills tied into reading in order to be strong reading comprehenders.
All right, so a little bit about dyslexia specifically, because we're going to be giving you guys a lot of ideas for what you can do in your classroom. It's not necessarily specific to children with dyslexia, but it's this idea that what we need to teach students with dyslexia, we should be teaching everyone anyways. So it all kind of goes together. And I want to say that when I went through my training on dyslexia several years ago, comprehension was not one of the components that we looked at, because oftentimes it's one of the strengths of students with dyslexia. In the last couple of years working at the elementary level, I've had several students that struggled a lot with reading because of, signs of dyslexia. But when I would ask comprehension questions, they would be able to answer really deep questions that other students that didn't struggle as much with reading had a harder time with. So just maybe keep that in mind, that sometimes comprehension is a strength for those students. So, if you think you have a student that might have dyslexia, maybe see if they can participate more with, through sharing their comprehension skills. But you will see students with dyslexia struggling. Obviously, if they're decoding words improperly, then they're not going to identify the correct word, or they might even struggle with figuring out what the word is because they can't sound it out correctly. If they're misreading words, they're also misunderstanding what they're reading oftentimes. And then what I've seen a lot is that I have students that have a lack in vocabulary and or background knowledge, which we're going to talk about tonight. So that might be another piece to be aware of for students with dyslexia. And obviously, if they struggle with all the parts of words, they're going to have a hard time being able to read unfamiliar words that have affixes that they don't know, like prefixes and suffixes. So, and then that'll all impact their writing as well. So this is a diagram that we brought out earlier in a presentation, and it's just this great graphic showing all of these pieces that make up like what students struggle with dyslexia. And again, students don't struggle with all of these areas if they have dyslexia. They may only struggle with language comprehension, or maybe only orthography, or maybe only phonology, or maybe two, or all three, you know. So just being aware that if a student struggles with reading, it is possible that they also struggle with language and comprehension. So just being aware of that is super important, and that's why we're here talking about this today. If you want to find the chat again, we'd love to know if you could put a yes, a Y for yes, or an N for no if you attended the Oregon RTI Conference. That was last Thursday and Friday. You guys are so fast. Thank you. Okay. So if you were unable to attend, we encourage you to attend it. They focused a lot on comprehension and working with words, morphology, things like that. But some of what we're going to talk about today is coming directly from going to the Oregon RTI Conference. Both Angie and I attended. We attended different sessions, so we've kind of put our brains together to bring to you some of what we learned at the conference last week. So, and for those of you who got to go, awesome. Hopefully we teach you something new today. And we did put the link, and I just got an email saying that all of the recordings are available. So you should be able to watch any of the sessions. Okay, so here is kind of where we're going. So we're going to talk about comprehension in 4 parts. So we're going to talk about how comprehension is impacted by how you read, so being fluent and accurate, how it's impacted by vocabulary and background knowledge, and then also focusing our attention on critical content as teachers so that we can support students in comprehension. And then we're going to do a little quick writing connection as well, because that is another way that you can bolster students in their comprehension.
Okay, so first we're going to dive into accurate and fluent word reading. We have done separate presentations. We did one all about phonological awareness, and we've done one all about phonics. And really, phonological awareness is the seed where it all starts. So that's where, because humans are natural speakers, our brains are wired to speak, but our brains are not wired to automatically read. That's a thing that we have to be taught how to do. So it all starts with speaking, and it just grows bigger from that. So we start with speaking, we learn letters, we start putting those letters together and words we can read and words we can write. And comprehension is like that plant finally growing from that seed. So so we're not focusing a lot on this tonight, but it is essential instruction that needs to happen in order for that seed to blossom and grow and become the plant of reading comprehension skills. The other part that falls under this is fluent word reading and fluent reading. And fluency is really a bridge between phonics and comprehension. So in order to read fluently, well, let me back up just a little bit for people that didn't see this last month. Fluency is really part automaticity, like being able to read those words automatically and quickly. And it's also part prosody, which is reading through the expression and being able to read it in the way that the characters might be feeling, or put emphasis on words that should be emphasized. In order to read with prosody, we have to have comprehension. So practicing fluency is also practicing comprehension. Teaching fluency is also teaching comprehension. So the fluency and the comprehension are very connected, and it's through that prosody piece of fluency. It's through being able to read through expression and having that expression match what the text is actually saying. So we also have a whole presentation on fluency. So we are just kind of mentioning these 2 parts really quickly tonight and not getting into them, but they are essential foundation skills and are absolutely necessary for comprehension. Because if I can't read it, if I can't sound it out, if I can't hear the word, the sounds in the word and blend them together, then I'm not going to understand what I'm reading. So we're not getting into the nuts and bolts of this tonight because we've done that before, but acknowledging that these things are essential skills needed for reading comprehension. Okay, so the next part that we're jumping into is vocabulary knowledge. And vocabulary knowledge is a kind of word knowledge, knowing what words mean. And we kids need all the decoding skills. They need to know syllable types. They need to know how to sound, what syllable sound should this letter say in this word, or what vowel sound should this vowel say in that syllable. But that is all meaningless if they don't know when they sound that out what it means. So we can decode words exactly as they should be decoded without having any idea what they mean. So yak is a pretty easy word to decode for students. If they know those 3 letters, it's a CBC word that follows the rules. But if they don't know what a yak is, it's a meaningless reading to them. So we need to make sure that we're teaching those words in order for them to understand what they're reading. Vocabulary does have different levels. So thinking about vocabulary is not just reading vocabulary. Vocabulary includes words that we recognize when listening, when we're reading, when we're speaking, and when we're writing. Our listening vocabulary is the biggest, and then reading is bigger. It's harder to produce it's hard to produce words, harder to produce words than hear them. So it's and I'm even struggling with producing words tonight. Just an acknowledgement that we have to include all of those parts of vocabulary. We have to include kids hearing vocabulary words and understanding what they mean on just a speaking term and speaking ways, and so that they can also read them and write them. There's also different tiers of vocabulary, where tier 1 are those words that we speak in everyday languages, everyday talking. Tier 2 are words that are found more in books and in written stories. And then tier 3 is that really technical, kind of very specific to the domain or topic that you're studying or talking about. So one of the things at the Oregon RTI Conference that Anita Archer did a few presentations, and we are pulling a lot from her because she's amazing and she does a really good job kind of summing it all up. So when you see a slide that looks like this tonight, it's a checklist of things that you should just kind of be able to go down and check the list of, yep, I do that. Yep, I do that. Oops, I should do more of that. Or how can I figure out this more? So this is our first checklist. Vocabulary tips from Anita Archer. So speaking with high quality vocabulary and academic language in our classroom. So like in my first grade classroom right now, I have butterflies that just hatched. Last week, they were in their chrysalis, and instead of saying they're changing, we always said they're in their metamorphosis stage right now, or they're going through their metamorphosis. And we just kept using that word, and my kids learned it. So using that high vocabulary, those high quality vocabulary words in the everyday language of our classrooms, raising the bar in the way that we talk to students, even when they're pretty young. Reading aloud to your students, make sure read aloud is part of your everyday routine. There are words in books that we don't use that we need to expose our students to, and just it broadens their world. Encouraging independent reading at home. There's like, classroom time is so limited. It's not the best use of classroom time to do independent reading in the classroom. It's better to spend that time on more higher quality practice or instruction time. But encouraging independent reading at home can really broaden students' worlds with vocabulary exposure and world knowledge exposure. To go back a minute to reading aloud to your students in class, if you're doing read alouds in class, that makes it more equitable, because we all know there's a lot of kids who will not get independent reading at home as much as we do to encourage it, and as much as we do to tell parents the importance of it. It's just not the reality in some families. And so that's the other reason why we need to encourage independent reading at home, but we also need to make sure that it's happening, that we're reading those books to our students, so that all students are being exposed to literature and books. If that makes sense. Using vocabulary, these other 4 we're going to go into a little bit deeper. So using vocabulary routines, making it a part of routine so it's easy to do. Pre-teaching essential vocabulary before reading. making sure you have morphology and word parts in your lessons. And then pre-teaching pronunciation so that when they do go to read, they already know how to pronounce some of those important words and don't have to struggle to figure out how to say that word or how that word sounds. So we're going to go into those a little bit more in the next few slides. So this is one of my favorite examples of why we need to be reading to our kids, because this is from Click Clack Moo, Cows That Type. Duck was a neutral party, so he brought the ultimatum to the cows. And the other picture has Duck walking over to bring that piece of paper, the ultimatum, to the cows. And I like it because this is a book that we can read to first and second graders, but I don't really casually bring up the word neutral party or ultimatum in everyday language. So by reading, we are exposing them to words that just don't normally come up and can have really great discussions and instruction about what those vocabulary words are. Yes, somebody in the chat said how important it is to read aloud in upper grades too. I feel like it should be in all grades because of that. There's words in there that we don't say, so it's important. I'm glad somebody pointed that out.
All right, so as we think about vocabulary, we really need to have routines. And obviously, if you are a classroom teacher, especially at the elementary level, your curriculum probably dictates how you're supposed to do that, which is great. But you should really consider how to have a vocabulary routine kind of across the board. So in math, what's your vocabulary routine? Do you have a routine in social studies? Because ideally, if you can have kind of the same thing happening across the board, the students know what to expect, and then they'll be able to hopefully retain those new words in a better manner. So one of the suggestions from, I believe it was from Anita Archer, was to first pick out like 1 to 2 essential words that you think that your students need to know prior to reading a passage, and making sure that they know how to pronounce it and what the meaning is. And then as you go along and read, you can obviously highlight more words, but like the 2 main words would be the ones that they'll remember from the routine. So, and obviously it'll make it easier for you if you're always doing the routine the same way. So here's a suggestion. So you can introduce the word, make sure that the students understand the definition, while also keeping that high vocabulary, giving examples, and then making sure the students understand. So asking them for non-examples or presenting them with a non-example and see if they understand why it's not an example of the word. And then having students come up with examples of things and applying it to questions that they're coming across or using it in a sentence. So one of the sheets that we've shown you already, and this would probably be for higher grades, although you could probably use it in 3rd if you really wanted to. So this would just be a sheet to show the kids about the vocabulary, right? So this may not be something you can do in every subject all the time, but maybe this is something you always do in language arts. So doing the definition, the characteristics of the word, like where does the word come from, which will sometimes indicate why it's spelled the way it's spelled, which will then reinforce the spelling of the word. And then breaking apart the word, and breaking it apart not only by like the syllables, so indestructible, it's also breaking it into your prefix in and d, and then able would be the suffix. So, you know, just really teaching the kids how words work in that they're reading. So this, I would encourage you to find something that works for you in your classroom, but try it across the board with everything, so that way the kids are improving with their vocabulary.
I want to pipe in real fast and add on that a lot of times our core curriculum gives us 8, 10, 12 vocabulary words every week. And I think what I used to do is like go through those all on Monday, and then we touch on them when they came up throughout the week. But I think what Anita Archer's really was trying to emphasize is that choose some of those, just the essential ones. I know that our core includes words that are not as high quality of words or are not essential. And so really like being intentional in the vocabulary words that we're teaching them, and especially the ones that we are going to in depth with a worksheet like this or some kind of instruction like this. And then kind of thinking, you know, we can still introduce those other ones and make sure they know them, but really thinking about which ones am I really going to teach.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. All right, so as we're thinking about vocabulary and what we're teaching, we've already talked about this idea that when we unlock vocabulary, it helps the kids across the board in so many areas. So their comprehension, being able to read and write as well. But when we're teaching morphology and all of the components, it'll then broaden their vocabulary, which will support their comprehension. So if you haven't seen our presentations on morphology or like word parts and things like that, I encourage you to go and check it out. Just because it's super helpful for kids, not only with reading, but spelling and writing. And so just a little bit about morphology and entomology. So morphology is the study of words, so taking a word and breaking it apart and understanding like a prefix or a suffix on it. Etymology is where does the word come from? Is it Latin? Is it Greek? Things like that. So when you're able to do that, then it will really build students' comprehension of words and word parts. And it'll also inform them on how to write them. So for example, if you're spelling the word medicine and you think about the I, the first I in the word, so med, it's a schwa sound. So if you don't know what that letter is supposed to be, what vowel it's supposed to be, if you connect it to another word that's familiar, like medicinal, you can hear that it's an I. So you can spell medicine. Same thing with remedy. So rem-a-d, it's hard to know what vowel it's supposed to be, but if you know the connection to remediation, then you can spell remedy. So this is another reason why it's important to teach word parts and how words work together. And Angie, I think you had a story.
Yeah, my son, who's in 4th grade, has an amazing teacher, Megan Murphy, at a Eugene school. And she has done a really good job teaching word parts and morphology. And my son came home one day, we were driving home from school, and he's rattling off different word parts and what they mean. And he said, phobia means fear, a really big fear of something. And bio means life. And he started making up different phobias. They had done that in class that day. And he's like, so biophobia means the fear of life. And he cracked himself up, and he was applying word parts. I looked it up, and biophobia, actually, I thought he thought he made it up and he cracked himself up, but it actually is a real fear. It's not so broad as the fear of life, but it's the fear of usually a specific type of life. But like reptiles or something like that. But he was taking those word parts and making up words and like just applying them accurately, and it just broadened his world up to, it broadened his vocabulary knowledge so wide, knowing all those word parts and what they meant, rather than just whole chunks of words.
All right, and then hopefully this looks familiar to you if you've attended our other sessions. So this is just a structured word inquiry. So it's kind of the same idea as the previous slide, where we're taking a part of a word, like act, the base, and then adding things to the beginning and the end. So prefixes and suffixes to build words. So, and this is kind of what Angie's son was doing as well. So if you haven't tried these in class, I'd encourage you to try it out, because you can even do this at the very younger ages. Levels when you're adding on your suffix for ed, ing, s, and then that hopefully helps the students understand that like it's a separate part from the word and it changes the meaning, which usually they know. So definitely check that out. All right, we're moving into background knowledge now.
Yeah, we're getting a good pace tonight. I think we're doing well. So we're gonna play this video. It's about 10 minutes long. It's one of my very favorites about reading comprehension. It's called Teaching Content is Teaching Reading. It has a music background. So what we're going to do is mute the music, and I'm going to read it to you. And if that drives you crazy, go back and read it on your own sometime. But I want to be able to read it in case somebody is on their phone or something and can't read it where they're at or where they're watching tonight. So just know that you're not missing any of the talking from the video. It's just music background with words that come up. And I do also have mild dyslexia, so I'll do my best to keep caught up and pronounce things correctly, but forgive me if I'm fumbling. Okay. Teaching content is teaching reading. You have heard, if you can read, you can learn anything. You have heard reading is the key that opens doors. You have heard reading is power. But what do you need to know in order to read? K sounds like. A, what a sounds like. T. Letter sound translation. Obvious. What about meaning? The cat is on the mat. The feline is on the mat. You need vocabulary. Obvious. But you need to know more than understanding vocabulary to read with understanding. You need knowledge of the world. Why? Reason number one, bridging gaps. I think it's going to fill it in there in a minute. People leave out information when they write. They expect that your knowledge will fill in the blanks or fill in the gaps. Try this. I didn't even order that book, but the postman left it on my porch in the rain, so now I guess I'm stuck with it. Idea number one, don't want the wet book. Idea number two, I must keep the book. What's the connection? Your knowledge goes here. Books are ruined when wet. Stores do not allow return of ruined merchandise. And that information added together equals idea one connected to idea two. You bring the knowledge to connect these ideas. Try another. This brain scan is fuzzy, so I think the patient was wearing makeup. Huh? Idea one, the brain scan is fuzzy. Brain scans use magnets, so metal makes images fuzzy. Plus, makeup contains trace amounts of metal. Equals the patient wore makeup. The brain scan is fuzzy. Without your knowledge, these two ideas don't connect. Reason number two, resolving ambiguity. Much of what we read would be ambiguous if we didn't have prior knowledge. Try this. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange items into groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you are pretty well set. It is important to not overdo things. That is, it's better to do too few things at once than too many. Why is this tricky? You know the vocabulary. Each sentence is easy to understand. That paragraph was about washing clothes. Now that you know that, try again. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange items into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you're pretty well set. Your knowledge about laundry makes the ambiguous sentences comprehensible. Without that knowledge, you'd never understand, even though you know the vocabulary. Usually it's not a block of text that's ambiguous, it's a sentence or a phrase. The hunter said, "There's a grouse across that field, maybe 100 yards away." His friend said, "Well, shoot." This sentence, "well, shoot," does not mean fire your gun. Background knowledge. Shotguns aren't accurate at 100 yards. A grouse that has flown from cover is gone. Well, shoot means too bad we missed it. Knowledge matters to reading. An experiment. Junior high school students, half are good readers and half are poor readers, according to a standard reading test. In each group, half know a lot about baseball and half know only a little. The students read a story describing a baseball game. Periodically, they must stop and show on a game board what has happened. So who understood the story? The kids the reading test said were good readers, or the kids who knew a lot about baseball? Good readers who didn't know about baseball got 18.8 items correct out of 40. Poor readers who knew about baseball got 27.5 items correct out of 40. Knowing the subject makes you a good reader. This effect has been observed with knowledge other than baseball. For example, the circulatory system, photocopy technology, Vietnam War. So who are, quote, good readers? People who know a bit about everything, so they know something about whatever comes up on a reading test. General cultural knowledge correlates 0.5 with reading comprehension scores. 0.50 correlation. That's about the correlation between parents' heights and their children's heights. That's a big correlation. So how is a student supposed to learn all this knowledge? Pop quiz. What percentage of class time goes to social studies in US first grade classrooms? 2%, 8%, 12%, or 17%? 2% is the answer. What percentage of class time goes to science in US first grade classrooms? 4%, 8%, 12%, or 16%? The answer is 4%. That's first grade. Third grade is not much different. Social studies about 5%, science also about 5%. What percentage of time goes to language arts? First grade, 62%. Third grade, 47%. Where does all that time go? Too much goes to reading strategies. Find the main idea. Activate prior knowledge. Identify the author's purpose. Experiments show, 1, reading strategies do help, but it's a one-time boost. Practicing reading strategies doesn't help. Number 3, there's no point in spending more than 10 lessons on them tops. England's openers labored 34 balls before scoring their first boundary as Strauss cracked 2 fours through the leg side. Cook made a patient start before motoring past it. Okay, that went fast. Summary. Once students learn decoding, they can decode anything. 2, but they can't understand anything they read. Comprehension requires prior knowledge. Number 3, attempts to boost comprehension through reading strategies alone will fail. Use reading material that teaches something about the world. Don't neglect other subjects. Teaching science is teaching reading. Teaching history is teaching reading. Teaching geography is teaching reading. Teaching music is teaching reading. Teaching art is teaching reading. Teaching civics is teaching reading. Teaching theater is teaching reading. Teaching content is teaching reading. Okay. I really like that video. I encourage you to share that with your staff if you have the opportunity or the means to do that, because I just think it's really powerful. And I think it's really, it shows the research and shows what is great. Yeah. So background knowledge tips from Anita Archer. So first, read aloud to your students. Read to them all the time. This and encouraging independent reading at home increases vocabulary. So we've already talked about it under that tab, but it also increases background knowledge. The more books that they are exposed to, the more world that they know about. It just broadens their world in both the word level and the world knowledge level. As you are doing read alouds to your students, though, make sure that you are reading fiction books and nonfiction books. I know as a teacher, my weakness is reading nonfiction because I love fiction and I love reading. I love like the coziness of story time, and we have really great discussions about fiction books. So my default is fiction, and I just don't feel as fluent or as strong of a teacher in reading nonfiction. So I'm setting like an intention to like really think about making sure that I'm including nonfiction when we do read aloud times. And then also with your read alouds, use that as a time to create a framework of knowledge. And so think about 2 or 3 books or 2 or 3 passages about a certain topic that you might be studying about, or that you want to increase their world knowledge about, so that they get a variety of exposure through different things when they're learning about it. And cut the fluff. That's one of Anita Archer's go-to lines is cut the fluff. Think that our classroom time is not long with kids, and we really just need to make sure that we are teaching with intentional choices and choosing passages with intention and teaching information that is meaningful to them and not just fluffy time or story time. Okay, so I learned this from my coworker, Deanna, who's here tonight, and this is a fabulous resource. So Readworks, if you know Readworks and you've already used this, maybe say yes in the chat or something. I know Deanna would say that. So Readworks is a free online website that has lots of articles at all different grade levels. I think from like kindergarten all the way up to middle school, maybe even higher. I'm not sure how high it goes, but I know it goes pretty high. And they have a lot of different articles that you can pull for your students, but they have on there something specifically called Article of the Day. And if you do have to register for Readworks, and you have to enter your email and password, but it's free. So once you register, then there's no cost to it. They have something, so then look up Article of the Day. They have an Article of the Day that, so every week they have a topic, and under that topic, they have 5 articles for a week. And they have that set for kindergarten up to 5th grade for sure, maybe even up to 8th grade, I'm not sure. But definitely for kindergarten through 5th grade, they have a topic per week with 5 articles for every week that would last you all school year. So they have 4 of those per month, 4 or 5 per month. So it's a great resource just to simply build background knowledge. The worksheet on the left that says my book of knowledge, and it has the 5 boxes for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, is one that is very similar to one that they have on their website. And Deanna taught me, and we've been using this in our 1st and 2nd grade classrooms this year, to play that article of the day, and then the kids record either in words or drawings something that they want to remember from that article. I just adapted it to the second one, where it's now a 2-sided page. So the back has Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and now they can draw a picture and write a sentence. So I'm building and writing into it, inspired by the RTI conference, actually. I'm getting more writing built in. And what I do with the book of knowledge is, when I first started using it, I went straight to the articles of the day, and I used that, and I just followed that and used that for building background knowledge. What my coworker and I have started doing, my other 1st grade teacher and I have started doing it with more intentionality based on what our current theme is. So right now we're reading a story about the moon, and we're studying the moon. So this week's book of knowledge, the topic is the moon. At the beginning of the week, we plan the 5 different things that we want to teach. So Monday, we taught that the moon does not make its own light. It reflects it from the sun. Tuesday, we taught that the moon orbits around the earth, and we taught the word orbit. So we use it to kind of build the background knowledge around the topic that we're reading about. We've also used it for vocabulary building. So the week of Earth Day, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday were reduce, reuse, recycles, and we spent a day studying those vocabulary words. So we've used it for vocabulary, we've used it for background knowledge, tied into our theme, but you can also, if you don't want to tie it into your theme, or if you just want to be more routine about it, you can go straight to a Readworks article and just follow their topics because they have them set for all year. So it's a pretty fabulous and very easy way. It takes about 15 minutes of the school day every day to add in this little background knowledge building activity. I love it. Thank you, Deanna. Okay, so the last thing, or the next thing that I really want to focus on, this is the last part of this part, is that just to be an advocate for your students, because our default in schools is often to have our SPED or title groups happen during science, social studies. We don't want them to miss core reading. We don't want them to miss core math. We don't want them to miss recess. So what's left? Science and social studies. And that's just not a great setup because they are, as we know now, that they miss reading instruction. They're missing that background knowledge, which is just getting them farther and farther behind. So we need to make sure that they are part of that. I wanted to share this idea that we have not tried in our school. If anyone has done this, maybe either unmute or share in the chat, because this is an idea that our school is thinking about trying next year. And it's called Win Time. It's what I need. And all students will have their reading support groups or what their groups are at a certain time of the day. So it's built into the master schedule. So they're not going to be missing science or social studies for their reading group. And I know master schedules in elementary schools are very complicated and hard to make. Oh, good, somebody's familiar with it. If you want to even add in if it works or how you can, because we're excited to try it. Just really make sure that you are making your schedule in your classroom or advocating for your kids to not miss that time. And then another thing to add into this is really making sure that your students have access to the content of what you're learning about without limitations of decoding words. So having audiobooks. My son, who has dyslexia, is a 7th grader, and his teacher allows audiobooks as an option for all students. So he doesn't have to feel embarrassed as somebody with dyslexia to go and ask for the audiobook. And when I was thanking her for that in the fall conferences, she just said, well, my purpose is comprehension. Well, my purpose is for them to learn about this story and reflect about it and grow from the content of the story. We're not learning decoding right now in 7th grade. So, so knowing her intentions, she was able to not have any guilt about them feeling that, not guilt, that's the wrong word, but like, it just made it accessible to everyone and not embarrassing for the kids that need that accommodation. So just making sure that when you are doing this stuff, that you're not limiting anyone who may have a learning disability or dyslexia. And that's also why in our book knowledge, we allow drawing and not just writing, because they need to be able to record their thoughts and not be limited by what words they can sound out or they're writing. Okay, so the last part is focusing on critical content. So really like reading to learn and figuring out what this is about. So Anita Archer taught a method of doing this and she called it how to get the gist out of a short section of text. So maybe a paragraph, maybe a part of the story that you're reading. And she recommended doing these 3 steps. So naming, like reading it, and then naming who or what it's about, and then stating the most important thing about that person or thing. And then taking those 2 pieces of information and trying to retell it in 10 words or less. So here's a little sample of what this might look like. Go ahead. So this is a story, male platypus, or it's a paragraph. Male platypuses have a spur on the inner side of each ankle that is connected to a venom gland located over the thighs. The spurs can be wielded in defense, and the venom is potent enough to kill small animals and cause intense pain in humans if the spur penetrates the skin. So that's a big kind of complicated paragraph. 1, who or what is it about, the platypus? Number 2, what is the most important thing in this paragraph about the platypus? And that can really kind of be a discussion of like, okay, so what is this most important part? It's a great discussion of main idea and details. Okay, the most important part is not that the venom gland is located over the thighs, but it's that they have venom, the males have venom. And then try to summarize that in a sentence or a small little bit of words. So you're not just rewriting the paragraph. So my attempt was male platypuses have venom for defense on an ankle spur. And doing this process in an I do to model it, we do it together lots and lots and lots of times till it's really easy for students. And then you do it on your own, and really making it heavy on the modeling and the we do together before you're expecting students to do something like this on their own. Okay, so another thing, this was not at the RTI conference, but this is a woman who has a great podcast. And if you click on her name on this, and also on the bottom is a link to the podcast about comprehension. So she taught, Anna Lucas taught 4 different ways. She called them micro skills. And I love this because it taught about things that we need to be specifically teaching kids that seem like small skills. These are all skills for the process of comprehension, not the final product. So it's like what students need to be able to do, and we need to be teaching them to do along the way. So one is pronoun relationships. This was a word I had never heard about until this podcast. And I had to go to Google to tell me how to pronounce it. I think it's anaphora. It was a new word to me, and it really just means it means replacing something that is already stated in the sentence with a simpler word like a pronoun. So Santiago lent his car to Olivia because she missed the last train. It's pretty obvious in that sentence who she is, because we generally notice that Santiago is a boy and Olivia is a girl. So we know who missed the train. But in the second one, Santiago lent his car to Peter because he missed the train. Who's he? Did Santiago miss the train? Did Peter miss the train? And having sentences like this as a discussion with your class, like teaching them to recognize who the pronoun is about, and using really obvious examples like she is probably Olivia and he, is it Santiago or Peter? How do we know? What's our guess? Why do we guess that? And having that direct instruction with kids, and practice, lots of practice with them. And then teaching connecting words. This is not only fabulous as readers, but it's also fabulous as writers to expand our ideas. So teaching because is a word that explains why something's happening. So anytime you read the word because, you know that what's following that is going to be explaining why what happened right before that word happened. But is a surprise or U-turn. So it's going to be something that changes direction. So is like cause and effect. The second thing happens because the first thing happened. And is a word that connects 2 ideas together. So teaching those 4 simple words, I'm doing this in first grade, teaching those 4 simple words at any grade level, and to find them in the text in order to practice what they mean, helps them with comprehension and reading. It also helps them expand their ideas in sentences. So double bonus there. Okay, so 2 more ideas that she had. One is gap filling inferences. So thinking about concretely having discussions with kids and explicitly teaching them that they have to fill in some gaps and infer about something. So these are 2 slides that we've used that I used with my students last week and my first graders, and I read it to them. So it was something that we didn't really use. This particular one as a decoding lesson. Mary was wet because she fell in a puddle. And I just said, what do we know for sure? What do we guess? Like, we know she was wet. We don't know how wet. We know she fell in a puddle and not jumped in a puddle. So we just concretely answered, what do we know for sure? And what do we have to guess about? What might have happened next? What is our understanding of what kind of gaps do we need to fill in there? And then we also even added some questions into this. Why was Mary wet? Okay, well, so we identified it as a question, but then we also had to go, well, what do we know? If we're asking this question, what does the person who's asking it already know? They know it's about a girl named Mary. We don't know how old she is. We know she's wet. We don't know why. That's what we want to know. And having those concrete conversations of like, here's a sentence. What do we already know? What do we have to guess about? Why do we think that? Helps them in their own independent reading too. And then always teaching kids to monitor for comprehension, and doing this, modeling it, practicing it together, teaching them that they need to stop and think about what they're reading and making sure they understand. And if something doesn't make sense, go back and reread it, figure it out. Why doesn't it make sense? What am I not understanding? And just really, I think that needs to be a lot of I do and a lot of we do in order for it to become a you can do this by yourself.
All right, so now we're going to move into another Anita Archer practice. And this is interactive, but it's this idea that we're trying to get students more engaged with their learning while you're doing a read aloud. So she was presenting this idea while doing a read aloud on birds because they were doing a unit study on birds. But the idea is that she was showing like having kids follow this process will help them remember things better. It'll build their background knowledge, improve their vocabulary, things like that. So the first thing was attend. So this idea that we're trying to get students to focus on what we're doing, obviously, but having the kids understand like this is your job. Your job is to, you know, attend to what we're doing, and then give them and then help them intend to learn. So what Anita was presenting last week was that she was teaching the students how to identify a bird. So birds have 2 wings, birds have a beak, birds have 2 legs. So she would teach, or she would read some of the information and then stop and ask the kids or point out, okay, so I know that it's a bird because it has 2 wings. And then I know it's a bird because it has a beak. So giving students a purpose for the reading and engaging them in the conversation about the reading right away, not waiting until you're done with the page, like doing it as you're going along. Then having the kids rehearse it. So not only did she have the intention for them to learn what identifies a bird, she would stop and have them say it out loud. Okay, say it out loud. What are the things that we know about birds? And literally, like, this is what she's doing. So encouraging the students to talk it out, because again, it's this idea that we're trying to get the kids engaged. And this is really good for students with dyslexia, where they're talking out like what they're learning. Because not only are they having to speak it, then they're hearing it again, or maybe they're hearing other students say it. So it just is going to really reinforce their knowledge. And then the 4th part was moving to retrieval. So retrieving it. So bringing back that knowledge to you. So, okay, so here's the interactive part. And I don't know if I'm doing exactly like Anita Archer did, but it's this idea that we're attending. So you're trying to get your fingers and pointing ahead. So you want the kids to attend. You want them to have an intention or intend to learn. Then you want them to rehearse. And then you want them to retrieve. And there is a website here that explains it a little bit better and more, they probably have some more ideas of how you can implement this, but it just was a really cool way to get kids more involved in their own learning while you're doing the activities. So kind of along the same lines, as we're thinking of helping students with their comprehension, is really presenting different types of questions for them to interact with so that they can build their comprehension or have a deeper understanding of something that they're reading based on the questions that they have. So these are just 3 different types of questions that you can present to students. Obviously, questions that they can find right there, right in the text. If they need to think and search for it. So maybe it's not something that they can retrieve right away because it's, you know, specific information that they don't remember. And then things that will connect them with the author and themselves. So, you know, that the inferential questions. And when you can present these different types of questions and teach students how to answer them, then they'll be better able to do it independently, obviously, and that's our ultimate goal. But we really do need to teach students how to answer these questions. And that we don't have any links right here on how to do that, but I'm sure you guys might have some resources. So if you have any suggestions, please put it in the chat. We'd love to hear about it. And you guys already know this because you've probably been teaching for a while, but not only do we need to teach about questions, we do need to teach about other parts. So we've been focusing on language and vocabulary and things like that. But we really need to be teaching about all these other pieces that you see over on the left. So what does the syntax indicate? The semantics, grammar, metaphors, idioms are really important to teach, analogies, print concepts. So even though we're not focusing on these things, these are also important things to explicitly teach our students, and specifically kids with dyslexia, so that way it'll hopefully make reading for them even easier and build their comprehension. Okay, so now we're moving into kind of our final piece here, and it's the writing. Yay. So I got to sit and listen to Joan Sedita. She did a presentation on writing, and her focus was for 4th graders to 12th grade, but I think that some of this we should be implementing right away at the kindergarten level, 1st and 2nd and 3rd as well. And even some of the activities that I'm going to show you are a little tiered. So for like, you could probably talk with younger kids about one and then older kids at the other. So anyways, so we've talked about the reading rope, and I think we've shown you the writing rope. But this is the writing rope, and this is something that she created back in 2019. So our first piece is critical thinking. So this is the idea that when you're getting ready to write, you need to figure out what you're going to write about, and even thinking about the whole process and maybe even how you're going to get the information that you need. Then there's the piece about how's it going to come out? You know, what kind of grammar should you be using? Are you going to be elaborating, making your sentences longer, including the correct punctuation? Then we have the type of writing you're going to do. Are you going to be writing a paragraph on comparing and contrasting two things? Do you need transitional words? You know, so being very specific to using the appropriate writing tools or writing steps and things, so that way you're presenting the information that you need to present. Obviously, we want students' voice coming out in what they're writing, and then making sure that they're writing according to what they're presenting and who they're talking to. And the last piece is just the nitty-gritty, the actual writing it down, or keyboarding, typing it up, or the spelling. And they did ask in the presentation whether students should be going straight to like typing if they struggle with writing. And she didn't really give a specific answer, but she did say that students really benefit from like typing on a computer at 7th grade. So if you consider that, and I think about my 3rd graders who are right now trying to do state testing and are typing like this and like hunting. So really at the younger grades, it may not be the best step for them if they're struggling to find those letters. So, so just food for thought. All right, so we're going to take this writing rope and talk about how this can be implemented in the classroom. So you guys already know, if you've taught writing, you need to think about what you're going to be writing about, plan it out, actually write it, and then revise. But if you take a look at the process writing routine, it is a circle. So it's this idea that we should be teaching kids in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, that when you write, when you're done and you finish the last period, you're not done. We really need to go back and think about the topic again. Maybe plan, you might need to plan some more or look at your writing. So it's just this idea that, you know, writing can always be improved, or you might think of more things that you want to add, or, you know, it's just this idea that this process isn't just do 1, 2, 3 and you're done. You just keep going with it. And that's something that Joan Sedita talked about. The other thing that I was very impressed with was the answer routine. So we're talking a lot about routines, and I would recommend that you have a good routine for writing as well, and that you always do it like this every single time, unless it's like an informal writing thing or, you know, a journal entry that might look different. But if you're having students write in your class and you want them writing longer pieces, having a routine of how they do it will help you, and it will help them, and it will help develop their writing. So this is something that she came up with the answer, so you can see. So A is for analyze. So you're going to determine what you're going to be writing about. figuring out what resources you need or where you're going to find your information, taking notes, and I'm going to show you some examples of what that might look like, selecting what you're going to use, so maybe going and actually getting those resources or looking in your notes that you've already taken, then actually writing the information down, and then things that we've talked about in the past, that edit and revise, they're really two different steps. So editing is really looking at your spelling, punctuation, capitalization, right? And sometimes, even I've done this, I have students also revising at the same time, and that's really a different process. And I would say should probably happen before you're editing, like really help the students take a look and see, okay, did I cover everything I was supposed to talk about? Did I, answer the prompt that was presented, or did I tell the information according to what the teacher asked me to do? So it's that whole piece, and that's why we've got that circle going with our writing where, okay, I'm going to go back and think about what I just wrote about. Was that what I was supposed to write about? So, so that I would encourage you to really emphasize that those are two different things. So the thing that was really cool about this process is that she took that think, plan, write, revise, and aligned it with the answer routine that I just showed you. And she showed you that really, when you are thinking and planning, that's the same as analyzing, taking notes, and selecting what you're going to write about. The writing obviously lines up with writing. And then the revise is the editing and revise. So it's kind of like I kind of see the left side as maybe the more primary grade process. And then your higher level thinking, maybe third grade, for sure fourth grade and up, you're following that right side process, and it's the same. Something else that I thought was really helpful too is if you are going to have your students writing about a topic or an article, and this is from Newsella, really scaffolding the article itself. So if you see here on the left, it has a topic, the last stop on the ocean trash highway is a tiny Pacific Ocean island. And then she put brackets to show, okay, this is going to be the first part. And then same with the second part, but you'll see here smack in the middle, there's this huge box that says main idea. So she recommended that you scaffold even the reading and have them do a main idea for each area, for each paragraph section. And she provided the first one, and then the students were supposed to do it for the other ones. And obviously you would want to scaffold and teach kids how to do that, but it really helps them understand, okay, so the main idea is what they're presenting here, and then underneath is the details. And then she even recommended that you underline and show the kids, well, what are the details that support that main idea? So scaffolding and showing them how to comprehend what they're reading. And then over here on the right, you can see the different types of notes. The 2-column notes is something I see all the time. Same with the one above. So it's this idea that you have your main idea that you find, and then the details. So if we can do this with our students, and I'm going to specifically use Step Up to Writing because they follow this process really well. So their idea is the traffic lights, where the main idea of the topic sentence is green, and then the yellow is like a subheading, and then the red is the details to explain the subheading, and then the go back green on the bottom is reviewing everything. So notice it's that 2-column notes again. With on the left, they use stars. Well, they have their topic at the very top, but on the left they have stars. So that's, the main idea. And then in the red on the right is the explanation. So you're taking your yellow star, what your topic is. So plastic in the ocean is a problem. And then on the right, you're giving the details. And this is just another example, just with different coloring and format. But then the idea is that they take that and put it directly into a paragraph. So they can take the topic, and that's that green, and then they have the yellow. So their reason, detail, or fact for supporting it was, first I would change the dress code. Then they had to stop and explain. But instead of having the students go from reading an article to writing, that last step, it's scaffolded all the way there. And then the color coding really will help students to visualize what's going on as well, especially kids that maybe struggle with writing, like our kids that have dysgraphia. So it's just a really great way to help kids in the process and also see if they're comprehending what they're reading, because if they can find the main idea but not the details, that's where we might need to help them a little more. All right. All right, you're up, Angie. You're muted, yeah. There.
Yep, now I'm here. Somebody just put in the chat how writing is not usually a focus as much as it should be. And that's so, so true. Becca and I talk about that a lot. And that's one reason why we've really put writing into as much as we can into all of our presentations, because reading and writing are so connected. And one of our favorite quotes is that reading is breathing in and writing is breathing out. And so it's so important. And it's the hardest thing we ask kids to do. And it feels like it's one of the things we talk about the least. So good job, Becca. I liked that a lot. So bringing this all together, because we have talked kind of like reflecting on the whole year of all our different presentations and then reflecting on all the complexity of reading comprehension tonight. Kind of two things that I wanted to point out when we bring it all together. And I want to add, okay, so one is making routines. Like somebody said in the conference that I really struck true with me, is that routines save your working memory as a teacher. And I've learned that a lot from my coworker, and how, like, when I have my automatic ways of doing my phonics lesson every day, or my head gritty lesson, or my, my even getting in my sounding out my encoding lesson every day, when all that's automatic, I can take my energy as a teacher and plan into the intentional focus of like what the content of that lesson is, and not so much how it's going to happen. And I can also put my energy as a teacher into like working with individual students around the room and really paying attention on how to differentiate as I walk around and do a lesson. So the more we can build this stuff just into our automatic routines as teachers, the easier it all is. And you can have daily routines. Here's how I'm going to do this part of reading every day. Or it can be weekly routines. This year we've been doing Wacky Wednesdays, and we've been doing nonsense words on Wednesdays. And so every Wednesday, we know that's the day we're going to apply our phonics into nonsense words on Wacky Wednesdays. And the kids expect that too. One time I forgot, and they were like, wait, it's Wednesday. Why are we doing real words? It's Wacky Wednesday. So just building those into routines so that we make sure we include it all together, or that we include it all in some part without putting a lot of stress and energy, because we're really busy and we need to figure out how to make this easier. And then connecting all of these things together is not as complicated as it sounds. So taking a phonics skill, finding a decodable to match that phonics skill. Decodables are often not as rich of text. So building in read alouds that go with that topic, that add in the rich text. But decodables are actually kind of cool with vocabulary a lot of times, because they use weird words that match a phonics pattern. There's some really interesting words that come up with them. So using the decodables to teach the vocabulary, morphology, and sentence structures, and some of that phonics and grammar, and then using that decodable passage to practice fluency, talk about comprehension and tie in comprehension and fluency with it. And then I think you can take notes on that too, and then produce writing from that same thing. So it's complicated, but it's also not that complicated. And we can connect a lot of these aren't all separate things that have to happen in our week as a teacher, if we can tie it in together. So like this week, my class is studying the moon. And so we're studying the O sound. We're talking about O says ooh as a moon, or as in book. So we have decodables that match that O. We're reading moon books, and we're doing some supported writing around if you want to be an astronaut, if you want to go to the moon or not. And we're doing a lot of our book of knowledge with our background knowledge and building kind of world knowledge about the moon. And so it's in little things of like, okay, every Monday we're doing this, every Tuesday we're doing this. These are the things I want to do every day. And just making it kind of part of a routine, and giving yourself grace to develop those routines over time. So this month I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to try to build this into it more later. it needs to happen too. So it feels, I guess, kind of like how I'm reflecting back on all the things that we've talked about in our presentations this year, thinking that there's a lot, and yet as I've added in little by little, it's not overwhelming, giving, but I've had to give myself grace of like, I can't do it all, and I won't do it all, and I won't be perfect at it all, but I'm going to do what I can. And as I know better, I'll do better. So someone typed in and asked if there's a curriculum for this all. And no, but what I have learned is that as I've learned this information, I can use our core curriculum more effectively, or I can use the core curriculum to say, okay, here's our theme. We're reading this moon story in here, and it's helping me to add all these things that I need to know that I need to add in. And it's definitely been like a few years of me learning this, so it's not overnight.
I'll chime in too. Anita Archer does have some curriculum herself. It's not all of this, but it does have, some like word work, which builds comprehension. One of her programs is called Rewards that I just started using with students. So yeah, but there isn't one curriculum out there.
We wish. Yeah. So we can do it, but it'll take us time, and routines I think are essential. That's my ending 2 cents. Okay, so a few resources again. The Reading Comprehension Blueprint by Nancy Hennessy is a great kind of reading comprehension focused book. I have found that there may not be a specific curriculum, but there's about 5 or 6 great books that seems to be on each topic. And at the end of our slideshows, we always do resources, and we always kind of put at least the leading book or author of that topic. So you can go back and look at the other slideshows and see if, look for more books that can kind of make your collection. Because really there's only a handful of them that have great information. Morpheme Magic is really good for morphemes. And there's another link to the Oregon RTI videos to go and learn more. This is our final night tonight. So we want to say thank you for, like, some of you have been here all year. Some of you, this is your first time tonight. And it's just been, I have really enjoyed this because I learned so much preparing for this, that it's been a great journey of learning for me this year. So thank you for joining us on that journey. And then there's a few plugs for other things that are going on, opportunities coming up. So this is through Decoding Dyslexia. Next Monday, May 9th, keep an eye on Decoding Dyslexia, because they offer and advertise a lot of things that are great opportunities also. So Eastern Oregon University professor is working on making their program more aligned with science of reading. So she's talking next Monday. There's 2 more here. Go ahead. This one is don't know if this is new or not. It's the first time I've heard about it from Decoding Dyslexia, but it's like a hangout and talk with teachers and a guided conversation for us to share these resources and ideas with each other. So that's a link too. So you can click on this when you get the slideshow, and it'll take you to how to sign up for that. And then this one is another presentation about how Oregon can do better with our reading instruction. And there's our emails anytime. There's a link. Decoding Dyslexia has put all of our presentations and all of our slideshows onto one page, which is great. So you can go back and watch some of them. The first few we didn't videotape, so there's no video of them. But all of the slideshows are on there. So they're all divided up, and feel free at any time to email us, because we are nerds about this and we love talking about it. So don't hesitate to reach out. And then I think one other thing I want to say is that we're looking next year, we're looking to we will probably redo the same series at some point. It won't be first Thursdays next year, but hopefully we'll be doing something like this again. So watch Decoding Dyslexia. We are also looking into doing a version of this specifically for parents in the future. So maybe next school year at some point, of kind of adapting this so that's specific to parents. And here's, telling parents, here's reading comprehension, and here's things you can try with your students. So So keep an eye out because we are interested in doing more, and keep reaching out to us because we love it. And I think the last slide just says PDUs. I think there's one more that just says PDUs will be mailed to you. And thanks for your time. So I'm going to stop the recording, but you guys can jump in with any questions or stay on and chat or say goodbye and have a nice evening.